There is a moment in every athlete's career that splits their story into a before and an after, a line in the sand that separates the promise from the proof, the dreamer from the player who actually did it. For Alex Eala, that line runs straight through the hard court of Hard Rock Stadium in Miami Gardens, Florida. It was drawn exactly 1 year ago on sun-scorched pavement in the Florida heat by a 19-year-old from Quezon City who had absolutely no business being in a semifinal, except that nobody told her that, and she wouldn't have listened even if they had. She arrived that week as a wild card. She left as something else entirely, a name, a story, a moment that the tennis world had not seen coming and could not stop talking about once it arrived, and now she is going back. Only this time, she doesn't need anyone's permission. Alex Eala is returning to the 2026 Miami Open as the number 32 seed, and that single number, 32, changes absolutely everything about what this tournament means for her, for the sport, and for the millions of Filipino fans around the world who have been riding this wave since she first made the world stop and stare. Stick with me all the way through this one, because by the time we have laid out the full picture of what is actually at stake in Miami Gardens this week, the points, the pressure, the players standing in her way, the history of this tournament, and the extraordinary story of how she got here, you are going to understand why this is the most important 2 weeks of Alex Eala's young career, and more importantly, why it might also be the most dangerous. Let's go all the way back to where this story begins, because you cannot fully understand the weight of what she is carrying into Miami this year without understanding exactly how she earned it. March 2025, Alex Eala was ranked number 140 in the world, holding a wild card into the Miami Open main draw. A wild card. That means someone looked at her record, decided she was interesting enough to give a shot, and handed her an entry that her ranking alone could not have secured. She had no seeding, no protection, no bye. She had to play every single round from the very first match against players who had earned their places in the draw on their own merits. And what she did with that wild card slot is one of those things in professional tennis that genuinely almost never happens. Round by round, she dismantled the field. She registered back-to-back top 10 wins over number 5 Madison Keys and number 2 Iga Swiatek. The same Swiatek who had dominated women's tennis for years, who had 6 Grand Slam titles to her name, who was considered one of the most mentally unbreakable players on the planet. Eala beat her in straight sets. She hadn't just gotten lucky, she had outplayed her. The left-handed game, the heavy forehand with the unusual angle, the ability to redirect a rally and completely disrupt the rhythm of methodical baseliners. It had worked at the absolute highest level of professional tennis against the best available competition. Her campaign ended with a hard-fought loss to then world number 5 Jessica Pegula in the semifinals, but the damage, or rather the statement, had already been made. That run catapulted her into the WTA Top 100 for the first time in her career, which meant automatic direct entry into the main draw of all 4 Grand Slams. She shot from number 140 to number 75 in 1 week. The floodgates opened. The world had a new name. And just as critically, she harvested 390 ranking points from that run, becoming the first Filipina WTA semifinalist and the first Filipino player of any kind to crack the top 100 in the open era of professional tennis. Those 390 points from Miami did not just represent a moment. They became the foundation of everything that followed. Now here's where the math gets serious, and this is what makes 2026 Miami unlike any other tournament in her career so far. Under WTA rules, ranking points expire exactly 52 weeks after they are earned, the moment the same tournament begins the following year. The 390 points from her 2025 Miami run vanish from the ledger the instant the 2026 edition starts. Right now, heading into this tournament, Eala has accumulated 1,542 ranking points in total. Those 390 Miami points account for almost exactly 1/4 of her entire world ranking. She must go back into that same tournament against a full and loaded field and earn those points all over again, or watch a significant chunk of what she has built simply disappear. The cliff is steep. If Eala loses her opening match, the round of 64, which is her first actual match since as a seed she receives a first-round bye, She earns just 10 points instead of the 390 she is defending. That is a swing of 380 points in a single loss. She could fall outside the top 50. All the seedings, the protected status, the first-round buys, the direct Grand Slam entry, all of it becomes vulnerable the moment she steps onto the court, and the result goes the wrong way. Should she fail to advance to the semifinals, she is projected to drop back inside the top 50 to 60 range, close to where she started the year. That is the brutal arithmetic of defending a breakthrough result. You built something extraordinary. Now go out there and defend it or give it back. And yet, the player who walks into Hard Rock Stadium this week is not the same player who held that wild card 12 months ago. Not even close. To understand exactly how much she has grown, you have to trace the full arc of the year that came after Miami 2025. You have to look at the road she has traveled across 3 continents, 8 tournaments, and a calendar that has thrown everything at her, the highs, the losses that hurt, the matches that came down to a single point under stadium lights at midnight in the California desert. The 2026 season opened in Auckland, New Zealand, where Eala reached the semifinals of the ASB Classic before falling to Wang Xinyu. Already, in the very first week of January, she was showing that 2025 was not a fluke. She was competing at the highest level from the jump. Then came the Australian Open in Melbourne, where she walked into the main draw as a direct entrant for the first time in her career. No wildcards required, ranked and protected. She lost in the first round to Alicia Parks, and that stung, but there is something significant about even that defeat. Her first-round match at Melbourne Park went viral. The crowd she had drawn was so overwhelmingly in her corner that the stadium assignment became a talking point across Australian media. The Filipino diaspora had shown up in numbers that overwhelmed the venue. The moment was bigger than the result, and on the WTA Tour, moments like that build careers. From Melbourne, she traveled to Manila, where she played the Philippine Women's Open, the first ever WTA 125 event held on Philippine soil, a tournament that exists in part because of what she has done for Filipino tennis, and reached the quarterfinals before falling to Camila Osorio. Playing in front of a home crowd in Manila as a professional athlete was something she had never experienced before. The emotion of representing her country on home soil at a tournament that carries her fingerprints across every inch of its identity. That is not a small thing. That is the kind of experience that matures a player faster than any practice session can, faster than any coaching session or tactical preparation. You learn something about yourself under that kind of weight that you cannot learn any other way. Then came the Middle East swing. 3 weeks across Abu Dhabi, Doha, and Dubai that laid bare both the consistency she had developed and the gaps that still remained. In Abu Dhabi, she reached the quarterfinals before losing to Ekaterina Alexandrova. In Qatar, she fell early to Teresa Valentova, in a result that reminded the world she is still 20 years old and still learning what it means to show up every single week against professional opposition. But Dubai was something different, and the tennis world took notice. Buoyed by Filipino fans who packed the Aviation Club Tennis Center whenever she played, Eala reached the quarterfinals of the Dubai Tennis Championships. On the way there, she dismantled Jasmine Paolini, then world number 7, an Italian player who had been to the French Open and Wimbledon finals, in the round of 32, winning 6-1, 7-6, her first top 10 win of 2026. Then she outlasted Sorana Cirstea in the round of 16. The crowd through that entire week was so heavily Filipino that when Coco Gauff, who ended Eala's run in the quarterfinals, took the microphone after the match, she did something remarkable. She looked into the stands, at the yellow flags and the handmade signs in Tagalog, and she told them directly, "I know you were mostly supporting Alex, but I have to say, it's great to be on a crowded court. I've played this tournament for many years, and to see the stadium full, it means a lot. I'd also like to thank Alex for bringing a new demographic to the sport." When your opponent is crediting you from the podium for transforming the atmosphere of their tournament, you are no longer just a player. You are an event. You are something the sport needs in a way that goes beyond what your ranking says about you. That Dubai quarterfinal run earned Eala 215 ranking points and capped a strong Middle East swing. She pushed to a career high of number 31 in the WTA World Rankings. She had been outside the top 100 12 months earlier. She was now approaching the top 30, and the momentum was clearly accelerating rather than leveling off. Then came the Sunshine Swing, the part of the North American spring calendar that culminates in the back-to-back WTA 1000 events at Indian Wells and Miami, the part of the calendar that changed her life the first time. Indian Wells arrived first. Eala, as the number 32 seed, received a first-round bye and opened her campaign against Ukraine's Diana Yastremska in the round of 64. That match ran for 2 hours and 43 minutes, the longest match of the day, ending just before midnight with Eala winning 7-5, 4-6, 7-5. The crowd in Stadium 3 that night was something people will still be talking about years from now. Hundreds of Filipino fans wrapped in blankets in the cold desert evening, Laban Alex, signs in the front row, the kind of noise you expect in Manila, not in the California desert at 11 o'clock at night. Some longtime Indian Wells tournament goers said it was the most Filipinos they had ever seen at the venue in their lives. Then came the match that the entire tennis world was watching. Eala against Coco Gauff in the round of 32, world number 4, two-time Grand Slam champion, one of the 3 or 4 best players on the planet. Eala was taking her apart, 6-2, 2-0, playing the kind of tennis that makes you genuinely recalibrate what ceiling this player might actually have, when Gauff was forced to retire from the match with the arm injury she had been managing. She told reporters afterward that her entire arm had felt like it was on fire. Eala collected the win, the 120 points, and advanced to the round of 16, where she met Linda Noskova and was beaten convincingly in a flat, deflating performance that reminded everyone that the climb to the top has friction in both directions. But those 120 Indian Wells points pushed her to a projected career high of world number 28 when the WTA released updated rankings the following Monday. Number 28 in the world at 20 years old, 18 months removed from being outside the top 100. That is an almost violent rate of ascent by any standard on the WTA Tour. Now let's talk about what tournament director James Blake did in the lead up to the Miami Open, because this is the moment that separates Alex Eala, the promising young player, from Alex Eala, the must-see global phenomenon. Blake confirmed publicly that Eala will receive prime billing on the main stadium court at Hard Rock Stadium. He did not bury the reasoning in corporate language. He was direct. He told the world that Eala's international following is so significant, her fan base so large and so mobile, that putting her on a smaller court would simply not be appropriate. He specifically said that Miami is a cultural melting pot with enormous international flavor, and that both Eala and Brazilian star João Fonseca would need to be on center court because of how many fans worldwide they each carry. It might feel like home matches for both of them, he said. Read that again. The tournament director of the Miami Open, one of the most prestigious tennis events on the calendar, second only to the 4 Grand Slams in prestige and prize money, just told you that Alex Eala draws the kind of audience that requires a main stadium, not because of what the seedings say she has earned, because of what actually happens when she walks onto a court and the Filipino community decides to show up, and they always show up. What was documented at Indian Wells this year made it even more undeniable. Practice sessions featuring Eala were drawing crowds comparable to those typically reserved for Carlos Alcaraz and the legends of the sport. The tournament posted a day-in-the-life video featuring Eala that became by far the most watched YouTube video in the event's history for that year. Tennis has had marketable stars before. Tennis has had fan favorites before. But the organic, grassroots, diaspora-driven phenomenon that travels with Alex Eala from city to city, country to country, tournament to tournament, is something that the sport has genuinely not seen before in this specific form. Florida has one of the largest Filipino communities in the entire United States, concentrated in South Florida and the greater Miami area. They will be in that stadium, they will be loud, and their presence changes the mathematics of playing against her. Now let's look at the field, because the draw matters enormously in a tournament like this, where who you meet and when can determine everything. The top seeds entering Miami 2026 are Aryna Sabalenka at world number 1, Iga Świątek at number 2, Elena Rybakina at number 3, Coco Gauff at number 4, and Jessica Pegula at number 5. Madison Keys, Naomi Osaka, Belinda Bencic, Karolina Muchova, and Linda Noskova are also in the draw. This is the full murderer's row. Every significant name on the WTA Tour is present, healthy, and competing. And every single one of them is very aware of what Alex Eala is capable of. Sabalenka enters as the defending champion, having won her first Miami Open title in 2025 by defeating Pegula in the final. Sabalenka, at her best on hard courts, is arguably the most difficult player to face on the planet. The serve, the power, the ability to end points from anywhere on the court, the relentlessness. She gives nothing away, and she punishes errors with the kind of ball striking that makes you feel like you are playing against a wall that hits back harder than you do. Pegula, who beat Eala in the 2025 semifinals, returns as the number 5 seed and will be carrying her own memory of that match, along with the motivation to do more this time. And Świątek, who lost to Eala in last year's quarterfinals, will have spent the past 12 months watching every frame of that match and preparing for a completely different encounter if their paths cross again. Here is the competitive truth that nobody wants to say out loud, but everybody in the sport is quietly thinking about. Eala beat Świątek last year as a wild card, as an essentially anonymous player with nothing to lose, whose game the world number 1 had barely studied and had no reason to have prepared for specifically in a matchup where zero pressure lived on Eala's side of the net. Repeat matchups in tennis are almost always different from the first encounter. The element of surprise evaporates. Tendencies get mapped, patterns get identified. The unusual left-handed angles get planned for in advance. When Eala and Świątek meet again, if they meet again, which the seedings make possible from the third round onward, it will be a completely different psychological equation. Eala now carries ranking points to protect, a reputation to defend, and the weight of being the player everyone expects to compete. Świątek carries the memory of a loss she absolutely did not see coming. Both of those things cut in both directions, and only one player knows which direction they cut harder for themselves. What Eala has shown across her 2026 season is that she has the game to beat the best players in the world on their best days. Her wins over Keys, Świątek, Paolini, and others were not flukes. They were the product of a specific, unusual game. Left-handed, high-bouncing forehand with angles that right-handed players do not naturally develop the footwork to handle. A gear change that disrupts baseliners who need rhythm to operate at their best. Meeting moments where that specific game was precisely the right tool for the opponent in front of her. The question at Miami 2026 is not whether she can play at that level. She has proven she can. The question is whether she can sustain it across 5, 6, 7 matches of increasing difficulty against opponents who have done their homework and prepared for exactly what she brings. The Sunshine Double itself is one of the most uniquely challenging back-to-back stretches in professional tennis. The complete double, winning both Indian Wells and Miami in the same calendar swing, has only been achieved 4 times in WTA history. Steffi Graf in 1994 and 1996, Kim Clijsters in 2005, Victoria Azarenka in 2016, and Iga Świątek in 2022. 4 times. In over 4 decades of combined tournament history, the gap between the 2 events is just 2 days. Players arrive at Miami on legs that have already played 6 or 7 matches across 2 weeks in the California desert. The Florida humidity is a categorically different atmosphere from the dry air of Indian Wells. The courts at Hard Rock Stadium play differently. The whole thing is a compressed, relentless examination of physical durability and mental adaptability at the highest level of the sport. And Alex Eala has to navigate all of it while carrying the additional psychological freight of defending the most important points she has ever earned. This is the context that makes her recent public comment so striking in its composure. She was asked directly about the pressure of returning to Miami, about the points expiring, about the defending, about what the tournament means for her ranking if it goes wrong. And her answer was this: "It doesn't matter if I win the tournament in Miami or if I lose in the first round. I know I'm here and I'm here to stay." That is not false modesty. That is not bravado either. That is the statement of a player who has spent a full year at the top of the sport absorbing everything it throws at you. the road, the endless scheduling, the losses that teach you more than the wins that confirm you belong, and came out the other side with something that looks very much like genuine, unshakable self-knowledge. She has been here. She knows what it feels like to lose important matches and come back from them. She has played on main stages in front of enormous crowds and discovered that the pressure does not kill you, that it is something you can carry and still play your best tennis underneath it. That discovery changes a player at a fundamental level.